Okay, it's 5 on the dot, so I think I'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lisa LaFontaine, and I am the President and CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. And I'm really honored to be here today. You know, we had planned to have a State of the Animals event in May or June of this year. And so this is going to be really different because this has been a really different year. And so instead of just talking about our results from 2019 and our plans for the future, I want to take a minute to talk about how has the COVID pandemic affected our organization and how have we changed our operations and our approaches in the face of it. I think that, you know, for all of us, it's been just a really scary and unprecedented time. Filled with tragedy, but a lot of human triumph too. And that has been true at HRA. And I'm really grateful to say that the crisis has challenged us in ways that we never expected. And, you know, I think that's true for the entire animal welfare movement, not just us. I'm going to touch a little bit on that today. But we have innovated in ways we never dreamed possible. And I think that a lot of these changes are going to be just the way we do things going forward, and it's actually going to help us save a lot more lives. So tonight, we are going to talk about the 2019 results from the Humane Rescue Alliance. We will talk about COVID-19 and our response, and then we'll close by talking about the future of HRA and the future of animal welfare. And then we'll have plenty of time at the end for your questions. And I will answer them until time runs out. And if we don't get to all of them, we'll figure out a way to answer any questions that are outstanding. And I just wanted to mention that I'm going to be joined by my colleague midway through, Chris Schindler, who is the Vice President of Field Services. And he's going to talk a little bit about his unit in particular. So before we get started, I would love to see who is with us tonight. Who is part of this community this evening. So we want to launch a little poll and just let us know out of these choices, how do you identify? Do you identify as a donor, a volunteer, board member, employee, adopter, or foster? Lauren, you want to launch the poll? Okay, the results are in. So we have a lot of donors and volunteers and foster families, and we're really evenly spread. So it's really great to see all of you. Okay. So 2019 was a pretty amazing year for the Humane Rescue Alliance. We served more animals and people than ever before in our history. And I think these numbers really tell a story. So just to give you a perspective, you know, for those of you who've been supporting the organization for years, 10 or 12 years ago, that figure in the middle of the live release rate was only 28%. And so the fact that we're now saving over 94% of the animals who come into our care is something that we're all just incredibly proud of. And as you can see, we took in 15,200 animals last year. And that's all species. That's dogs and cats and guinea pigs and rabbits and snakes and birds. And we also care for wildlife. And so there's just never a quiet moment at HRA, and we are always pivoting to take care of whatever animal is in our care. And sometimes we have to learn a lot in order to provide them what they need. Our medical team was very busy, and these services are incredibly important. The safety net services that we provide the community sometimes are the only veterinary care or the first veterinary visit that people have had. And we love to welcome them in because we want to create a really warm and welcoming experience where if it is an early time to the vet, they come to see it as a really positive thing and that we're friends and supporters and are really going to help them care for their pets. As you can see, we're powered on volunteer hours. We had volunteers contribute almost 58,000 hours this year. And the number on the right is going to change a lot this year because of the pandemic. But last year was a record-setting year for our foster program where out of the 15,200 animals of all species that we served, 2,731 lived in foster homes for part of the time they were with us. And many of them were actually adopted from those foster homes. So our field services officers were very busy too. They had a record-breaking year with 20,370 calls, and that can be anything from a raccoon caught in the rafters to a deer in the tidal basin in DC to a kitten on the metro tracks. And so we literally never know when we get up in the morning what the calls are that are going to come in. We had, as you know, we do humane law enforcement for the District of Columbia, and we had nearly 2,300 calls of suspected cruelty to animals. And that's about, that's pretty consistent with what it had been the year before. Out of those calls, we ended up seizing nearly 200 of the animals into our custody to prosecute their abuser and give the animal a new lease on life. As you can see, we donated many tons of food to people in the community who had times of income insecurity or maybe a long period of time where they needed food from us. And really, it's important to us to keep families together, and so we love these programs. And for our families who are involved in our HOPE program, we provided free pet care services to over 2,000 animals. So I'm really, really proud of last year. Now, one of the big things that everybody probably saw in the news is that in July, so just about a year ago, the Humane Rescue Alliance and St. Hubert's Animal Welfare Center did a really historic merger because we became the first regional multi-state direct care community-based animal welfare organization in the country. And what that meant is that our combined efforts touch over 100,000 animals each year. And we provide community safety net programs throughout DC and parts of Maryland and Virginia and all throughout northern New Jersey. And so I think we're just beginning to see the impact we can have with some of those safety net programs. We have, we will always rescue animals. We will always find adoptive homes. But the thing you'll see from us going forward is a real scaling up of our community support services. And part of that is the result of the pandemic and the income insecurity that we know people are gonna have. As I think about the year, the word that comes to mind is collaboration, locally, regionally, and nationally. And a merger is probably the ultimate expression of collaboration, but it was just one way that we worked together with other groups to create a better safety net for animals. And I really believe in the power of collaboration. And I think that when we come together and we invest in our own communities and our neighboring communities, we can create the best possible outcomes for animals. So we thought we were going into 2020 in a really strong position. And as a matter of fact, I wish I had $1 for every time that I said 2020 was going to be the year. And 2020 has been the year for sure. The first couple of months, we were really focused on program expansion and growing some of our services. But then the pandemic hit, and it hit hard. Both of our communities, DC and New Jersey, were particularly hard struck by the pandemic. And as we saw it coming to our communities in early March, we sat down as a leadership team to say, okay, what are our priorities? And I remember we put 3 flip charts in front of us, and the flip charts were, what are the things we have to keep doing no matter what? What are the things we really need to keep doing that are critically important and we want to find a way to keep doing it? And then what are the nice to haves that we can postpone? And it was important to us to make those lists because what we knew is that we had to empty all of our shelters. And at the time, we had animals living in 6 different facilities. We didn't know if people would be giving up their pets because of COVID. We didn't know if people were going to need temporary housing and support because their pets had COVID. We were really unsure of what was going to happen. And so we thought the most prudent thing to do would be to empty our facilities as much as we could and get the animals either into permanent adoptive homes or into foster homes. And you know, the exercise that we went through where we divided into those 3 categories, the must-dos actually became part of the executive orders that the mayor of DC and the governor of Virginia issued, that the services that we provide were considered essential services. And so our doors never closed throughout the pandemic. You know, I think the response was overwhelming for us, as it was for all of my colleagues who I've talked to who run other humane organizations. But when we opened the doors and said, please come get the animals, our facilities were completely packed with people wanting to adopt. But what I think was even more of a surprise is the number of people who wanted to foster. And we had, in the first 6 weeks of the pandemic, we had 2,500 families offer to foster an animal for us. So at many times we had more foster families than we did animals. And that, you know, that created a challenge in that we wanted to engage them and we wanted to make sure they were ready to take an animal when we had one for them. So our communications and social media teams got really busy with engagement so that we could keep them connected even if they didn't have a foster animal in the home. Having so many animals in foster care meant that we had to reinvent a couple of other really significant activities. The first was our adoptions program, because in DC, we didn't have any adoptions happening at the facilities at all. And in New Jersey, we only had adoptions happening out of one facility, our Madison headquarters, and for a very small window of time. So we had to create a virtual adoption process, which works pretty much like this call tonight, where people would browse and see an animal and they would do a Zoom meeting with the foster family and with the animal. They would have a chance to ask questions of people that had really, really gotten to know those animals and could really talk about their personalities and what their needs are. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we've adopted out 1,400 animals through our virtual adoption program. And I want to give a shout out to our team because the process that they developed has been shared widely with hundreds of other animal welfare and rescue and municipal organizations, and many of them are doing virtual adoptions too. And I put this bullet up just to show you that a typical month brings us 70 new foster applications, but in the first month when we put out the call for help, we had 1,165 people apply to foster. And that's pretty amazing. I want to just point out the slide down below because I think this will make you guys as happy as it made me. This gentleman here adopted his 2 foster dogs, Snezka and Jack. And these poor dogs had lived their entire life in a shelter in Russia, and they came to the Humane Rescue Alliance and went into foster care, and their dad permanently adopted them in the midst of the pandemic. And so these guys who only knew institutional living are going to have a beautiful life from now on. The community programs area was another place that we dramatically scaled up. Just as we were concerned about animals being surrendered because their owners got sick with COVID or couldn't financially care for them, we were deeply concerned about the impact of the financial upheaval and unemployment and the stock market crash and the closing of small businesses, and what would this mean for pets? We knew what it would mean is that people that hadn't been insecure a couple months ago are insecure now, and that our outreach and safety net services would be needed more than ever before. So we worked with our partners at Greater Good and got 100,000 pounds of pet food and supplies. And so that has been delivered to us on large pallets throughout the pandemic. And as soon as that food and those supplies come in, we distribute them. And many of them went to 21 other animal welfare organizations who needed food and supplies to give out in their communities. And then 8,000 pounds of food went out in our own regions to our regular pet pantry clients. So we're going to keep this food coming because we are still deeply, deeply worried about what's next. You know, many of the states are stopping their moratorium on evicting people that can't pay rent, and that could be catastrophic for animals and families who have animals. And so in the midst of reinventing everything we do, we've also been scaling up for how can we serve all those families and animals as we can open our doors up a little bit more. So the week that the pandemic hit and we sent most of our employees to telework, and we reduced people coming into our buildings, and most of the animals were leaving to go into foster care. We did some financial projections because we wanted to have a realistic picture of what this pandemic might do to us if everything had to be shut down for a period of time. So we were extremely conservative. We did forecasting assuming that we would bring in no earned income for the remainder of our fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. So what that meant is no more training classes or behavior consultation for people with their pets, a shutdown of our doggy daycare in Madison, New Jersey, closing of our Buddy's Boutique and our online stores, no adoptions, and a closing of our medical center and our public medical appointments. And so altogether, those activities bring us about $450,000 a month. So we projected that we could lose up to $3 million in revenue. And that was a really scary proposition. And so we put some austerity measures in place. We deferred spending that we didn't have to do this year. We put hiring freezes in place for all but our essential employees. We didn't buy those things we were going to buy or go to the training sessions we were going to go to, just because we wanted to weather this storm. The other thing that happened that was amazing, and we have some board members on the call today, our board of directors came forward with a $350,000 challenge, which had been met. It was met within the first couple of days, and it was well exceeded. And so between the board and all of the donors and all of the animal welfare funders and all the foundations who support us all together gave us $1.1 million. And so that helped a lot. And then we were very fortunate, we're fortunate to have a really savvy CFO, and we were able to get a PPP loan. And what that meant is that we could keep all of our employees. We could keep our team together. And that was hugely, hugely important to me. I didn't want to add to the carnage of people losing jobs and people being income insecure. And our people are amazing. You know them, you've met them. They work hard, and I knew that they would be probably facing a lot of uncertainty in their personal lives, either caring for sick parents or elderly parents or partners who had lost a job or kids who were home and they're having to work and take care of their kids. And the last thing I wanted was for them to have to worry about their jobs. So we put this financial plan together, and we are actually in a very stable place through the end of this fiscal year. Now, I will tell you that we're looking very carefully month by month at how our revenue recovers, because this could go on for a while. There could be a second wave. There could be additional social distancing. And so we want to make sure that, that we can sustain for the long run. So now I'd like to turn it over to our Vice President of Field Services, Chris Schindler. Chris.
Thank you, Lisa. I greatly appreciate being able to share some of our field services work that we've been doing. You know, while our communities have been closed in the face of the pandemic, our services have continued to be essential. And our animal control officers and our humane law enforcement officers have continued to respond to animal emergencies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And our HLE officers have continued to investigate all calls for animal cruelty that have come into us. And really, I mean, our ACOs have responded to more than 4,000 calls since March. And those calls range from domestic to wildlife. And I think one of the highlights that just really has stayed with me from some of our work, because there's so many, is we had a call from a community member who their senior blind and deaf dog had slipped and fallen in a sewer. And I'm sure many of us can imagine what, you know, what that would mean to us. And, you know, the dog slipped in and Prince was his name and he disappeared. And we immediately responded and our officers got on the scene and we began, you know, pulling the sewer lids off and you know, at first we couldn't find him. We kept searching. We kept pulling sewer lids off and we finally had a time where we could not open some of the sewer lids and solicited help from our colleagues at DC Water who came out. And this was well into the night. We popped sewer lids and searched the sewers and traced all the sewer lines for almost a mile. And then finally climbed down into one of the last sewer lids we popped and could see with our flashlights eyes in the distance. And it was Prince. And we were able to rescue Prince. And this whole time, Prince's family was awaiting, you know, waiting to find out whether or not we were going to be able to locate him. And we were able to reunite him with his family that night. And it took hours, but I mean, that's the commitment that our officers and HRA has to be helping in the community and providing these services that really are essential and life-saving. You know, and it's not just, it doesn't end with our animal control officers. Our humane law enforcement officers are active every day. You know, they've done 383 investigations of animal cruelty and neglect since March. We've had 8 arrests for individuals who have committed heinous acts of animal cruelty. And we've seized 52 animals that we're now providing care for and getting the treatment and care that they need so that we can continue to pursue those investigations. And in the midst of all that, our HLE officers and animal control officers actually partnered on a call from Homeland Security where there was an eagle that had gotten into the Homeland Security parking garage and got turned around. And they were able to develop a plan and work with Homeland Security to rescue, who's pictured here, a bald eagle, you know, this really majestic animal that then we took to City Wildlife. They gave him a check over and he was actually released later that day, healthy, and was joined by his mate as he was released, who flew. So, you know, it's been incredibly powerful, our work every day, but certainly with everything that's going on, to have this work continue is so critically important to everything that we do. And so another thing that I wanted to bring up was something that, you know, we're really proud of, this commitment that we've made to disaster response. You know, I've spent years of my career responding to disasters, not only in the United States, but internationally as well. And it's such a critical need to have trained and equipped disaster responders. And thanks to some generous donors, we have now been able to certify 17 of our responders in swiftwater rescue, technical rope rescue, and a lot of other elements that are required to deploy to disasters. And what we've seen is that disasters, especially hurricanes, are growing every year. Flooding has become more and more significant. We saw that with Hurricane Harvey, with all of the devastation that came from that. And now we will be able to deploy at a moment's notice, not only in the communities we serve, which covers 500 miles of coastline in the mid-Atlantic, but also nationally, to be able to aid other agencies is really critical, and to be able to help reunite people and their pets when something, you know, as horrific as that happens to you. And so we're really proud to be able to move forward in that. And I will turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Chris. I'm sorry I kept pinging away from the slide with the eagle. I'm
Yeah.
I'm a better speaker than I am
Yeah.
slide manager. So,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I wanted to point out, and thank you so much for that, Chris. I think it's really amazing that our donors through Giving Tuesday last year and through a special fund drive that we did with a couple of our long-term supporters, they allowed us to do this training, to get all of the custom suits and equipment for all of these 17 emergency responders who are now certified, to get the boats and the ropes and all the specialty gear that we need to deploy. We actually had 4 other people who were going to train, but a couple of them actually had COVID, and a couple of them could not travel from our New Jersey location to DC, so we're looking to get them certified. And we will have the largest disaster rescue team on the East Coast with 21 people once they're certified. And I think that it's coming not a moment too soon. We're all deeply, deeply worried about what the disaster season is going to bring for humans and for animals. There are so many communities that are already gutted, who are already lacking resources, whose hospitals are overrun, whose shelters are struggling. And if you layer on the cataclysmic impact of this pandemic and the economy with hurricane season, it really could be the worst that we see in a long time. And we're deeply worried about that. And so we wanted to get our team ready so that they could deploy at a moment's notice. And we are fully deployable at this point because we have all the certification and all the gear, and we're ready to help out in any community where there is a disaster. Starting right now. So I'm really proud of the donors that we have who they gave money knowing that they're going to be helping animals and people in other communities. And I'm really proud of our team because this was hard work, but you can see they had a little bit of fun doing it. So I want to talk about the future because it's something I'm thinking a lot about. It's something I'm talking with colleagues about. And one thing I can say to you is the future is going to be nothing like the past. We're going to be in a state of reinvention and adaptation and innovation for the foreseeable future. So I think one of the really big opportunities to lift up more animals and people is to scale up our way station. And those of you who have heard of it know that the St. Hubert's Way Station was just a best-in-class, still is best-in-class transport program. And what we're looking to do now is, in addition to moving animals from places where their lives are at risk to communities where people are waiting for them, we are building a coalition out of the 92 members of the Way Station family. And through that coalition, we want to share resources, we want to share expertise, we want to help the source shelter communities who are drowning still in overpopulation to build their own capacity. We don't want to transport and then have people in the same dire straits next year as they were this year. We want to help them build community programs, build foster programs, expand their adoption avenues, work on legislation in their communities, build coalitions in their communities. So the movement of animals continues to be a priority because that is life-saving work. But you know, the fact that we're moving animals has created such a bond of trust among us, because if you're, just imagine being a shelter in the South, you've been loving an animal, caring for him, and then you put him on a van and you send him north to St. Hubert's, you have to trust that on the other end, he's going to be received with love and kindness and respect and care. And that great consideration is going to be given to his next chapter. And so that trust, I think, really provides the foundation for this collaboration of sharing resources. And I'm talking financial resources, human resources, supplies, whatever we can do to make a real difference in the lives of all those source shelter organizations, and convening the destination shelters so that they're helping our source shelters too. And one of the things I feel really strongly is that we cannot tolerate animals and people falling through the cracks in society. We just can't tolerate it. And when animals are falling between the cracks, I see collaboration as a way to seal up those cracks and lift people up and help more animals. So with that, I wanted to share our anchor video, which we are premiering to you tonight. It's going to be sent out on the 1-year anniversary of our merger in mid-July, but we wanted to have you get a little preview of it. So without further ado. Hey, is there a sound problem?
I came here in 2000, believe that you can get a lot more done by collaborating than you can on your own. When I came here in 2007 to lead the Washington Humane Society, I found an organization that had more promise than any I'd ever seen, but also more challenges. I had reached out to the Animal Rescue League to see, could you take in animals from us when we're full and you have space? And within just a couple of months, we realized that our organizations would be stronger as one, and more importantly, we would have exponentially more impact. For us, that merger was never a final destination. It was a beginning of modeling a more collaborative approach to animal welfare. So in 2018, we had the opportunity to take our vision for collaboration a step further by bringing together the Humane Rescue Alliance and St. Hubert's Animal Welfare Center. What that has allowed us to do is become the first organization in the country that is multi-state, community-based, providing direct care of the animals and really taking a look at what's going on for those animals and people in an entire region so that we can come up with regional solutions. And the primary way that we've started doing that is through the way station program.
Aiken County is a huge county. We're about the size of Rhode Island, so it's a very big area. It's very rural. Overpopulation is our major challenge. We take in about 5,000 dogs and cats every single year consistently.
10 years ago, it was 6,000 animals coming in and 9 out of 10 were being euthanized. Those kind of numbers of animals, you can't adopt them all locally. And so together with the community support, 10 years later, we changed the numbers.
The way station program is the reason we are able to save the lives that we are.
The way station program works with over 90 different animal welfare organizations where they don't have homes for those animals, where they have incredible overpopulation, and partnering them with animal shelters and communities who have loving homes but no animals.
The dogs load, they're happy, they're excited, they jump into the van, and then we're thrilled to see them go someplace where people are actually waiting for a pet.
These animals are received at our shelter through no fault of their own, and they deserve a second chance, and we're giving them a second chance through our partners' help.
Today with the Way Station program, we accepted a transport of 21 dogs and puppies from Aiken, South Carolina. These guys are all scheduled to go to one of our receiving partners in Vermont. Not only are we transporting the dogs, but we're investing in the sending partners so that hopefully one day they won't need us to transport dogs.
St. Hubert's really built our relationship. They have helped us with funding TNR cats for spay neuter, for community animals, for vaccinations. They've invested in saving lives in our community, and it's not for selfish reasons.
Our colleagues in the South are in the trenches. They're working so hard to save as many lives as possible, and it's not easy for them. So all these dogs need is a ride, and that's what we're doing for them. We're giving them a ride to a better opportunity. They get to stop here, get off the truck, rest for a day or two before they move on to their final destination in Vermont tomorrow.
We're not far from being that organization that's struggling. We're just a few years out. We can provide hope in that we were there and we came to a different place, and now we're here to lend a hand and stick with you while you get to that place too.
We are the final piece to these dogs' stories. We are the end game for them. We get these dogs and we follow their journey all the way from down south, and we're their final destination of finding their forever home and starting a new chapter of their life. We're really lucky here where we have a ton of adopters that are just waiting to find the right dogs for them. And we live in an amazing area where having a dog companion is just perfect.
Adopting just seems to be the right thing to do for so many animals that need really nice homes and opportunities.
So in 1870, we were founded in advocacy, we were founded in community service, and now as we face our 150th anniversary and look at our next 150 years, what we see ahead is a reality where we're taking a national approach to the problems that cause animals to be homeless or abused. We are creating a bigger national safety net. We're ensuring more animals have loving homes. We're ensuring that more families have the joy of rescue and adoption. We're not just sheltering animals, we're focusing on what are the root causes of animals being homeless or abused. And those are the issues we're tackling, because we know if we go at those with vigor and dedication and creativity, we're not going to need shelters, because the community will become the best shelter we could ever ask for.
Wow, I get a little teary every time I see that. I hope you guys liked it. And I'm so proud of our team for putting it together. This has been a labor of love that has been in the works for many, many months. And I think little did I know how important that last sentence was, that if we do everything right, the community could be the best shelter that animals could ever ask for, because that is where COVID has really brought us today. So I just want to show you some really striking things from the world, the period of time that we're in, and share with you some of the messages that we're getting from our communities. So this slide shows us the intake and outcome of 2019 versus 2020. And you can see the sharp decline, a historic decline in intake from March to April, climbing ever so slightly in May. It's still pretty steady in these first few weeks of June, where you see the graph ends is not that different from where we are today. So just take a look at that and look at how fewer animals were coming in during this period of time. It's the opposite of what we expected. We thought our shelters were going to be full of people giving up animals, needing help, needing temporary or permanent placement for their animals, but that just has not been the case. And the second thing is I want to show you what does it look like as of last night at midnight. So we have, as you can see, 364 animals who are in our direct care in our shelter facilities, but we have 609 animals in foster care. And this has been pretty typical of the ratio since the beginning of the pandemic. And so what we're challenging ourselves with now is the question of, why can't this continue? Why can't we keep this up? And there is no reason that it can't continue. I think that this has been a real moment of inflection in society for animals, much the way that Katrina was a moment of inflection. The lesson we learned from Katrina is that people would put their lives at risk. They would risk their livelihoods and their families to stay with their animals. And that brought about an era of more groups doing rescue and transport. It brought about an era of legislation that protected people's right to shelter with their animals in times of disaster. And it changed everything forever. And this is going to change everything forever too, because where we expected our building to be full of animals, we have empty buildings and empty cages. And this 364, those animals, many of them are just staging and getting the medical care they need to go into foster care. And so as soon as they come in, they go out into foster homes, and our foster team is working unbelievably hard to make that happen and to support those families. And so there's really no reason that we shouldn't continue to house as many animals in foster care as we possibly can going forward, and that we shouldn't build the support services for foster families as large as the program can sustain. So I just want to stick on this point for a while. I think that we saw that people who got COVID wanted to keep their animals with them while they were sick, if they could, if they weren't hospitalized. Their animal was a key part of their recovery. Or if they were hospitalized, they made arrangements for them. They had plans for a place for them to go with a family member or a friend. And so what is that message? That message is that animals are squarely in the family now. They are, I don't think 10 years ago, if we had a pandemic, that we would have seen this. But in these last 10 years, all of the work that we've been doing has made a difference, because people valued and prioritized their animals in the face of this crisis. And, you know, we all hear stories of what animals are doing for people right now. I don't think it's an accident that more people want to foster. There are a lot of people that their entire lifestyle has been disrupted. All of their rhythms and routines are out the window, but they can give back by helping families, by helping our organization with foster. They can also help out with adoption and socialization, and they're doing adoptions for us, and we trust them to do that for us. And so the animals are giving people something to feel really good about. The animals are giving people a routine and someone to care for. And in many homes, an animal is the only person to talk to or cuddle with, because people are socially isolated and living alone. And so I don't think we're ever going to go backward. I think that animals are family, and that is here to stay. So we've been having a lot of conversations in the field of animal welfare. There are multiple conversations every week with literally hundreds of people on it, sharing stories, fears, frustrations, ideas, programs, services. We have been an amazing support for each other, and we have learned from each other. And we've all been struck by this message that society is sending us about how much they value animals and how deep that is. And so, you know, early on in these group discussions, we started talking about going back to normal. And a group of us said, no, there's no reason to go back to normal. There were things about normal that actually could be improved upon. There were things about normal that were not allowing us to help as many animals as we possibly could. And so we really made the declaration that we're going forward, we're going ahead with all of the learning that we've had in this last few weeks, with all of the collaboration and mutual respect for partners that we've developed over these last few weeks, and with the innovation and the resilience that we've had. You know, we've all created a muscle to innovate and adapt, and we'll never forget that we have that, and we're going to keep using it now. So I just want to make a point that the place we're going back to actually honors our past. And these two slides come from the early era of the Washington Humane Society, which was founded 150 years ago Sunday, actually. It was June 21st, 1870. We're going to be celebrating next year when it feels a little more appropriate to celebrate. But this was a weekend for real deep contemplation about what is the next 150 years for our organization. And so this image on the right is the Humane Law Enforcement Vehicle from 1896. And the image on the left shows 3 children who were rescued by the Washington Humane Society. And so the point I want to make is that when we were founded in 1870, we were chartered by Congress to protect animals from cruelty and neglect. And that original congressional charter gives us the same authority that Chris was talking about a moment ago to do investigations into cruelty and advocacy and prevention of cruelty today. So we're doing the same work from that same congressional charter. And what a lot of people don't know is that 15 years after we were founded, Congress expanded our charter to also care for and advocate for children who were being abused and neglected. And so these children were actually rescued by the Washington Humane Society because they'd been abandoned in terrible circumstances in downtown DC. And, you know, from 1870 through 1970, Washington Humane Society only sporadically had shelters. Most of the work we did was in the community. Most of it was solidified and made possible by strong community relationships, by us trusting people in the community and them trusting us, by us being really creative about what to do with the animals when we rescued them from a cruel situation, and from an abundance of good Samaritans in our region who opened their doors to foster animals and children. And that's how we operated for our first 100 years. And so as I think about our next 150 years, I really think about going back into the community in a deeper and more extensive way. And we are not alone in that. We are part of a coalition of people, and we have an exciting new pilot program, which we believe is going to become the future of animal welfare, called Human Animal Support Services. And I just want to give a shout out because I know the team from Maddie's Fund is on the call, Mary, Amy, and Lori. Maddie's Fund has provided the initial funding for this project. And I'm so grateful for that because I really do think this defines how things are going forward. And really, I guess just this is a very big oversimplification of this approach. And I'm going to continue to talk about it with you, continue to answer your questions, have small brown bag lunches so we can talk about it more. But I just wanted to introduce it to you tonight. And if you think about animal shelters, they are a place where animals get separated from their family in order to get care. And what we want to do is pivot to a place where we can keep families together. And so an example I would give is that instead of having a really low threshold for surrendering animals because we're not doing enough to provide support services, we're going to invest in more support services so that we make available food and medicine. And our friends from Chewy are on the call, and PetSmart, and they have been amazing in giving us food that helps to keep families together. And so we want to do more of that. We also want to use our shelter facility that has been freed up by all these foster families caring for animals to perhaps provide some temporary boarding for people who are just temporarily between homes, or they're in hard times and they just need a few weeks to get back on their feet. There's absolutely no reason to take an animal away from them if that animal is loved and cherished, and it's really only a matter of resources and weeks to get them back together. Another thing is that rather than housing animals in cages where they get stressed out and they don't act like themselves, you know, they're nervous, they're scared, it's unnatural for them. We're going to have more animals in foster care, just like we do now. You know, this isn't just about programs, this is a philosophical approach. And one thing that's really important to me is that, that we respect people who have animals even when they're struggling to keep them. And that we don't always have to be right, and we don't always have to be the experts. Sometimes we are the experts, but I think it's even more important for us to be the conveners and the linkers to other social service programs, to other animal welfare organizations, to community members, to one another. And so we're really going to be looking at how do we spend more time in the community coming up with community-bred and generated solutions. And then the final thing is that if you imagine the shelter world, the shelter is a hub where people come to get services. If we diffuse that more, so we're doing more community outreach, it's more of a network model, so that in a lot of ways the community is caring for its animals and we're here with a shelter to support them when they can't find the solutions themselves. And I think the really nice thing about this model is that this is a huge, huge tent. Everybody is welcome in this tent. And And we see ourselves working with breed-specific and other foster-based rescue groups. We see ourselves collaborating with animal control agencies in other jurisdictions. Going into the community doesn't just mean going into the neighborhoods. It means going into the animal welfare community and doing a better job of working together as well. And maybe making services available to some of those groups. So I just want to go quickly through the elements, and I want to save plenty of time for your questions, but I've touched a little bit on these. But essentially, we want to make space in our shelter for emergency housing if people are just between homes, or if they have veterinary needs that they just can't pay for. We want to provide that care so that their beloved animal can stay with them. I'll never forget the first time that I saw an owner who thought she was going to have to give up her pet to us be told, no, just wait. We'll do the surgery. Go ahead home. Get blankets ready. We'll do the surgery, and we're going to call you tomorrow to come pick up your dog. And I was there when she pulled in the parking lot and literally ran in and just burst into tears because she couldn't believe that someone would give her pet back to her. And that's the way of the future. Much like we've done in the last few weeks, we're going to be more reliant on remote technology so that the public can access us more easily. They can text us. That our website is really a virtual shelter. It's not just a web page, but it's a place to engage, and it's a place to get services, and it's a place to learn and have conversations. Volunteers, I did a town hall with our volunteers last night, and we expect them to get engaged in even more work. We want to train them in more of the actual work of the shelter. We want them answering phones. We want them doing follow-ups. We want them supporting foster cares. And so we really look at our volunteer program as getting exponentially bigger and stronger and more entrenched and engaged in the work of the organization. Keeping families together, I've talked a lot about this, but you can just imagine all the things that go wrong when you have a pet. We want to find a way to plug those cracks if people don't have the money to get the services themselves. The thing that I feel a renewed commitment and passion to coming out of this pandemic is that people have proven to us that they love their pets, that they value them, that they're family members. I feel even more determined than ever before that they should not have to give them up just because they've fallen on hard times. And I'm determined, as long as I have breath in me, that in our communities, having a pet should be a right, not a privilege. I don't want there to be a gap in haves and have-nots, some of whom can have pets and some can't. What we see is an incredibly generous pool of donors who actually give money to support these safety net services, because they're really good people who know that those pets are loved, and that the people who are suffering from income challenges and just having financial struggles love their pet as much as people with means. And I'm really deeply grateful to our donors for seeing that. So, even though reuniting people with their pets is a big part of what we do, we don't do enough. On average, about somewhere between 48 and 52% of dogs who get loose in our communities get reunited with their owner. But for cats, it's a much bleaker story. It's somewhere between 4 and 6%. And so we know we've got to do a much, much better job of reuniting lost pets with their people. And what that means is, in many cases, finders are going to keep lost pets. They want to do it. It's more likely that if an animal goes missing in a neighborhood, if flyers and things are put up, if neighborhood listservs are engaged, the animal will probably find its way home more easily than if they were removed and brought miles away. But we're also going to really invest in technology of all kinds to be able to reunite lost pets with their families. And we're really excited for the day when our animal control officers, when they pick up pets, are scanning them and seeing where they live and just bringing them home. And so that's more microchipping, it's more collars and tags, it's more use of listservs. It's just more outreach of all kinds. We are also going to be taking a case management approach where we really integrate with human social service groups, hunger, healthcare, domestic violence, mental health, to create a broader safety net where we're at the table with all those other groups, looking at families as a systemic whole where we can provide multiple services to that family to keep them together. And we are going to be getting training in social work. I mean, it's an entire profession, so we're going to rely a lot on people that are very knowledgeable and have MSWs and have devoted their life's work to this. But I think we're going to find that there's just a way of talking about this and looking at the entire family unit that's very different from the blinders that we may have had in the past when we only looked at the animal. And then finally, we're going to keep on doing two things that we've been doing really robustly in these last few weeks, which is expanding telemedicine so that our veterinarians can do visits with animals through Zoom meetings and other forms of technology and reduce the burden on people and reduce the cost. We want to make our foster program as big as we can make it. And then we're going to really deeply invest, not in a deep way, I mean, in a very deep way with community organizations. One of the things I've been reflecting on in these last few weeks is that we tend to go to human social services groups when we need something from them. And I think we have to do a better job of just being networked with them all the time. So we're part of their world and they're part of our world. And we just naturally think to call each other because we're all invested in the same thing. And it only makes sense because the underlying issues that cause people and animals to suffer in communities are often the same issues. So I'm really excited about those collaborations. So with that, we want to hear from you. So we're going to have a moderated discussion. There's a little Q&A section in your screen. And if you type your questions in, then I think my colleague Danny is going to share them with us and I will answer them.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Chris. We've had some really great questions already come in on the chat. I guess to start things off, Lisa, we have a question about the human animal support services model. Given that Washington, D.C. is a city with a large number of high impact human service organizations already, how do you envision that you'll leverage kind of the unique position in D.C. along with the already established partnerships to be successful as a prototype city?
That's a great question, and it sounds like somebody who's really knowledgeable of that world, so I hope that you'll reach out to me with any suggestions you might have. But what we're doing right now is we're doing some community mapping while some people are working remotely of just looking at who are all the social services groups out there. And you're right, in Washington, we're incredibly fortunate because we not only have local groups, but we have a lot of national groups and policymakers who are headquartered here too. So we're really doing two levels of mapping. We're looking at who does service delivery in DC, and we'll be doing the same thing up in New Jersey, but also who's headquartered here, who can help us, who can really bring us into places that maybe we haven't been brought in before. You know, one thing that I always know is when we go to a home to help people with an animal, oftentimes we get invited into that home. And that's something that a lot of social service groups would consider a privilege. And so I think there's a lot that we do that they would want to know about too. But that's how we're going to get started. And I just had a question about whether this will be, whether this has been recorded and whether there's been, whether we can send it out afterward, and it is recording. And so we will make this available to people that either missed the end or couldn't attend tonight.
Absolutely. Lisa, we had one more question here. Given the new model HRA is proposing, is HRA still planning to move forward with the efforts to build a new shelter?
We are, yes. And I had this exact conversation with our volunteers on Tuesday. So for those of you who've been following, we have a really nice property on M Street, right across from the Washington Navy Yard. And we have been doing fundraising for that. And the fundraising is actually going really well. and we're very, very close to the point where we can break ground. I actually had a meeting with the team about the new building on Wednesday morning, because what we're doing is we're making some design adjustments based on different kinds of a larger foster program, more safety net programs, probably additional medical services being needed, flexible space where people, where we can convert it based on whatever happens, if we have a large intake or if we have a natural disaster. And then we also want to look at designing space where maybe some of our partners can also have their organizations, so we're right there together. So I'm really optimistic that we had hoped to break ground at the end of this year. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, just because we're hearing there could be a second wave of the pandemic and more social distancing, and that will affect construction crews' ability to move forward. But I have a strong sense that as soon as the world opens up and we're ready to go forward, we will have both the design and the funding in place to do that.
That's great. We had one more question here. Is there an update that you could provide on the DC cat count?
Oh, yes, I could. Actually, I wonder if, I think our program manager might be with us, Lauren Lipsey. I don't know if she is, if we could make her, we can turn her microphone on. Can that be done? Do we know if she's with us?
Checking right now.
Okay. What I can say while you look is that the DC cat count was a 3-year project, and we are just moving out of phase 1 of the DC cat count and into phase 2. And we've had camera traps, and they are not what they sound like. They are simply cameras that trap an image of an animal. They do not hurt the animal. And we've had these cameras all around the district for well over a year, in green space, in neighborhoods, in urban space. You really could just have a blast just looking at the images on that, because we have so many beautiful wild animals in this city. So we're moving out of that phase of the DC cat count where we actually do the camera work, and now we're going into the phase where we're going to be doing surveying of people who own cats or who care for outdoor cats, because we're trying to layer on information about where cats are. Some of it will come from our cameras. Some of it will come from what's called transect walks, where we actually walk in really focused, designed areas where we know cats are to physically count them, and where we do surveys of people who have or care for cats.
Hi, Lisa, it's Lauren.
Hey, Lauren. I don't know if I've missed anything, but Lauren Lipsey is our Vice President of Community Programs, and she is really the driver and leader of the DC cat count. So Lauren, is there anything you would like to add about it?
I think what is really exciting is we're entering our 3rd year of the project as it was originally envisioned. And in fact, it's been so successful in data gathering, and we believe that we'll be able to produce a phenomenal suite of tools for other communities to use in conducting their own cat counts as they endeavor to develop cat population management policies in their own areas, such that we envision a phase 2 of this effort and are in discussion right now about how that will be structured and managed, but believe that the impact of this original 3-year project that HRA has administered will be far-reaching and long-lasting. And the governance group has met a couple times, most recently last week for several days, and very excited about what's to come. And I think the analysis portion that will be coming up in this final year of the project will yield incredible insight into Washington, D.C. and just cat populations and intersection with the human population and urban environments that can be applied elsewhere as well.
And you know, I think one of the really wonderful things about this project is, I'm going back to collaboration, because you know, this second phase that we're contemplating is really about bringing this project to other communities and us being in a position to help and mentor them. But if you rewind to the beginning of this project, the thing that excited me so much about it, and my wildest dreams have been exceeded here, is that we brought together people who are not normally in collaboration. As a matter of fact, don't even normally talk to each other. People from the world of wildlife ecology and birds and conservation and animal welfare. And we quickly built a coalition of people who respected each other, who learned about each other, who learned to appreciate one another's fields of expertise and passion. And we built a working group that I would argue that the collaboration of those non-traditional allies is one of the most exciting outcomes of the project. And I think it's a collaboration that we want to export. I mean, if you can bring some of the parties together that we've brought together and build this type of focus and shared goal and respect, I think you can do it in almost any disparate group. Do we have any other questions? I know we're a little bit over time, but I'm happy to answer anything else.
Sure, Lisa, looks like we have time for one more
Okay.
question. And it's a good one. I wanted to pull it up here. Are you concerned that leaving quarantine might reduce the availability of foster homes? And then the second part would be, what are you thinking that you're going to be taking forward that we've learned during these COVID times into the future for HRA?
Thank you. That's a great question. I thought and talked with a lot of people about the foster homes, and I was actually talking about this yesterday with the project team who's designing our new facility. And one of the project manager is very involved in the world of buildings, and he knows all of the most kind of current on-trend thinking about what is being built in terms of human space. And I think we all expect that remote work and telework is here to stay in some form, not at the levels that we're seeing now, but certainly in a much stronger way than we ever saw before. And so I think a lot of people that are fostering might not go back to work full time. They might continue to work remotely or not work as many hours in an office. But before the pandemic hit, we had hundreds of foster homes who had people who worked full time and still figured out a way to do it. So I'm not expecting a significant change. And because we developed this wonderful virtual adoption program, animals are being adopted out of foster care continuously. So it's not like there's this whole group that's going to come back because they've been going home as quickly as they've been going in. I mean, there have been days where one cat will get 30 applications for adoption. So there's not this big backlog to come back. They've just been moving through the system. And I think that actually the opposite's going to happen. People will have found it so rewarding to have opened their home to an animal. I mean, I've fostered over 200 animals myself, and there is nothing like the sound of an animal sleeping in a home for the first time after being in a shelter, where they're relaxing for the first time, where they're snoring. Once you have that in your home, you want to do it again and again and again, speaking from a serial foster mom. So I think it will continue. And in terms of what's on my mind, I think the biggest thing is that people love animals. They leaned into us. I mean, people leaned into us in every way. Our donations went up during this time when we thought they were going to go down. Our foster care went off the roof. Adopters came through for us. People are donating supplies. They're engaged with us on social media. And so that leaning in just tells me that there's a community of animal lovers around us who are ready to be advocates and ready to continue helping us with this work. I think the big thing that I'm concerned about is what happens as people stay unemployed, what happens as people get evicted. How can we be more present? How can we be more accessible? And how can we provide them more than we have been? And I think that safety net programming is going to be incredibly critically important to community building and community wellness in the years ahead. So with that, I see 74 people hung in till after time. Thank you so much. I know everybody on this call gives to us in one way or another, either through their time and talent, their money, their resources. thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you do. I will say that this has been an incredibly tough time for us on the staff, but you have sustained us, you have inspired us, and we will keep on doing the work to earn your incredible regard and trust. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you again at one of these, and I hope to see you in person sooner than later.